16-inch vinyl micro groove. Is this micro groove? Yeah, this is 33 1/3. Most of the time, these 16-inch records are vinyl, not shellac. Although they did make shellac ones in the beginning. They're 33 1/3, and they're designed to hold a lot of time because they would send this. This is a whole radio program. They would send this program off to different radio stations, and they would just play it and make it look like there's people there in the studio where there never was. It was just a record. That's one. This is another different format. This is actually a standard 78. What's different about this is there's only music on one side. From 1900 to 1908, they only put the record on one side. They didn't even think about putting it on both sides. That was just, wow, put it on both sides? They didn't think of that until 1908. It was actually Columbia that thought about that. I'm going to put this on the turntable here to show you. You know, this is a 10-inch 78, a 12-inch. They made a lot of 12-inch 78s. This is also on one side. See, Enrico Caruso when he was young. He paid a lot more money for the red label Victrolas, and they were 12-inch, and they were, you know, for the opera crowd. But what's really funny, in 1908, Columbia came out with a double disc record. They got music on both sides. 25 cents, much cheaper, because they wanted you to find out that, wow, you can turn the record over, and you can hear the advertisement on this side. I'll even play for you the advertisement. They thought they were so proud. Columbia was so proud of themselves for thinking about putting a music on both sides of a record that they actually did this. It's 1908.
The purpose of this record is to demonstrate the Columbia double disc record. It is not offered for sale. Columbia double disc record. Music on both sides. A different selection on each side. Two records at a few cents above the price of one. They may be played on any disc machine, the Columbia Graphophone or the Victor talking machine. And they give you double value for your money, plain as daylight. The music of Columbia double disc records is the music itself. Not merely our idea of what we can make.
Yeah. You listen to the advertisements. They sure like to toot their own. You guys advertised, they toot their own horns back in those days. This one here is from 1902. It's a one-side record. I think it's very interesting because in 1902 there weren't even any cars yet. Model T wasn't out yet. Even the Oldsmobile Curve Dash wasn't out yet. And all the cars that were on the road were either steam cars or electric cars. That's what he says in this record.
Remember when the turnpike was nothing but the cow path, and now they got electric cars running on it. Yes, it do beat all. What's going on?
Yeah. The turnpike weren't nothing but the cow path, and now they got electric cars running on it. Don't that beat all? All right, another format. .33 1/3, both sides. It is vinyl, but it's, you know, vinyl, you can make it as thin as you want. You can make it as thin as a piece of paper. 7-inch. You can make these things any way you want to. Now this is a Pathé record, France. It's not 10 inches or 12 inches. It's metric. It's around 11.5 inches. Now what's the RPM on this? This is like 1906. Pathé had their own sizes, and the English kind of went along with America and Canada on records. The French, they were on their own. They said they made 20-inch records of 120 RPM. Those are hard to find, and I imagine they were all, these are all shellac, of course. They were, I think a 16-inch, 20-inch record and have it not break. This record is made of aluminum with acetate coating on each side, and this is one of those home recordings. You make your own record. You buy the machine. It's a duo disc machine. It's got 2 holes so that you got power to spin it around, and it grinds a record for you. And This is Frankie Carl. I don't know. He did a concert and someone decided they wanted to record a concert, and it was early 1940s. They didn't have tape recorders in 1940s. Frankie Carl, 41 or something like that. They didn't even have wire recorders. We didn't know anything about that until the Nazis invented wire recorders in the early 40s. But we didn't even know about it until we went into Berlin in 1945, and we discovered all these wire recorders. And then they took it back to America and different countries, England, I'm sure. And they said, well, we can even make it better if we make this, instead of wire, we'll make it tape. And then tape recorders came from that. But in those days, this is from the 30s. Same kind of deal. This church wanted to record the service and the sermon, and they didn't have tape recorders or anything except record players. You recorded sound on record players. This is aluminum. Solid aluminum, not coated with anything. It's from the 1930s. It says you're supposed to only play it with fiber needles because a steel needle from a Victrola would ruin it. Well, we got better than fiber needles nowadays. We got modern record players. You want to hear what an aluminum? You want to hear? Would you like to hear what an aluminum record sounds like? It's a 78, of course.
Supposing him to have been in the company, went a day's journey, and they sought him among their kinsfolk and acquaintance. And when they found him not, they turned back again to Jerusalem, seeking him. And it came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors,
chapter and verse,
hearing them and asking them questions.
Speakophone. There were dozens of different companies that made these home records, and you can make your own records at home. I put this one in here. It's an old vintage one side 12-inch record, but I put it in here because it's different color. It's not, shellac itself is not black. They took millions of these old shellac records during the war, broke them down and melted them and dissolved them in alcohol, and they coated furniture with them. It was called Japanning. If you see black shellac from the 40s, furniture coated with black shellac like that, that's been japanned. That's just the word they use for coating it with old phonograph records. But shellac is this color. This is the color of real shellac, without the black stuff in it. Oh, this is one of the first vinyl records ever made. Vinyl came out in 1931 for the Vitaphone movie industry, because Vitaphone's sound-on-disc system, the first soundy, was by Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer. You know Al Jolson. He's the guy who painted his face black to do that coon stuff. It's ridiculous, but that's what they did in 1927, the first soundy movie. I'm not being offensive by saying coon stuff, because it was the white guys that were the coons. It was people like Al Jolson. They put the white and black together and to look like a raccoon. It's horrible. Ted Danson did that once to Whoopi Goldberg. Anyway, 1931, RCA Victor figured out how to make a material that didn't break. All these movies with the sound-on-disc sound, like The Jazz Singer, had shellac, 16-inch shellac records at 33 1/3 RPM. The 33 1/3 RPM speed actually originated with the Vitaphone sound-on-disc movie system. But they were breaking all the time, and the people that had movie theaters were, upset that their movie, they couldn't play the movie with the sound anymore because the record broke. 16-inch shellac records, down, guaranteed to break. So they did their research. The engineers at RCA Victor and the engineers in the plastic companies said, why don't you make them out of this PVC, polyvinyl chloride? And it's not the same as modern vinyl, because when you find an old, they call that Victrolac. Victrolac is what they called the vinyl PVC shellac, or lac, whatever, that's just the name. Surprised they didn't call it vinola. It's not the same. They use different plasticizers because whenever you see one of the old 1931 records, it usually has a gray misty coating on it, which you can take a rag and you can wipe that off. But that never happens with regular vinyl. With vinyl records, they never get that coating. They're made of different. This is from 1939, and it's got modern vinyl. This is just like modern vinyl. 1939 is right around the first modern vinyl records. Not the Victrolac, which was a little different. That came out in 31. This is a Lucky Strike commercial. You send this to the radio station, they play it on there, and it's a Lucky Strike commercial. Different one on both sides. 1942, the V-disc came out. 1942, during World War II, shellac was no longer accessible because of the war. You couldn't get shellac. It was illegal anyway. The government said no shellac. The record companies were no longer able to make records. Although they did have the vinyl technology, the government put out millions of these things to send out to the soldiers. That's a V-disc. A V-disc came out in 41, 42, in I don't know when they stopped. But they're made of vinyl. You can send these overseas. It's 12-inch, and it's a 78 RPM with the big needle groove. Here's another thing. This is a 10-inch 78. But it's from the 50s. In the 1950s, it's an epic promotion for disc jockeys. Promotion record. When they made the shellac 78s in the 50s, they sold them the same as always. It's a 10-inch 78, big groove. But they could make the vinyl, the ones for disc jockeys, they made them out of vinyl. This is actually vinyl. You can tell. It's not going to break. They sent this to people in the mail. They didn't break. Different formats. Oh, here's an oldie. Here's an old one-sided record, but it's 8-inch. This is actually pretty rare. It's 8-inch. It's not 7. It's not 10, and it's a cheaper price. Victor decided that they were going to make a 35-inch record. A 35-cent record. Apparently their 10-inch records and 12-inch records were more expensive, and they made these cheaper. I have this one here. This is a regular 45. 45s, 7-inch, micro groove, vinyl, 1.5-inch hole in the middle. But I got this because it's made. This is when they first came out. This is one of the original first 45s. They always used different color plastic that year. They wanted to color code them. Big Maceo, Chicago Breakdown, 1949. If you can find one of these, they're pretty cool. I'm going to show you what, in order to play this on a regular record player, you have these plastic spindle things. This is how they always came out in the 50s and 60s and 70s. They always made them like this. But the original ones, before they even had that kind of plastic inserts, if you find one of these, that's original from 1949. They're kind of tricky to even put them in. You got to put it in like this, bend the record up a little. No, you got to put it in, so that's, yeah, okay, and then, oh, now it's snapped in place. Permanently snapped in place. You can't get it out. You got to bend the record to get it out of here. That's 49 record with a 49 thing in the middle. Oh, see now, Columbia invented the 33 1/3 12-inch LP. RCA Victor invented the 7-inch 45 RPM single. Well, Columbia wanted to make a single out of vinyl. They didn't want to tap into RCA's format. They thought they were going to get sued. So they made a 7-inch 33 1/3, that's their speed, from 1949. Same age as that one, but they didn't want to mess with RCA Victor's patent. And then later on, everybody started making 45s the same as RCA Victor's. And Columbia stopped making 7-inch 33s. This is a single. But it's 33, so there's just a little bit of music on each side, this little bit. Later on, when they realized that 7 inches is enough to put 2 songs on each side, they did. How about this? You get these at Woolworths, Bell Records. This is a 7-inch, 78? Yeah, a 7-inch 78. But it's vinyl. 7-inch 78. Just like that one. Well, that's a 7-inch 33. John Glenn, Man in Orbit. When he first went into outer space, they made a record about him. 33, 7-inch. John Glenn talking. You get these. These aren't nearly all that rare, because everybody who got one kept it. He just passed away recently. This is from 1961. All right, this is a weird format. Well, let's go through these first. Here's a Columbia 33 1/3 7-inch EP. 2 records on each side, just like I said. That's probably from the 60s or something. Here's an oldie, one side, 5.5-inch record. It's Little Wonder Records. This record actually uses the phrase rock and roll on it, or rockin' and rollin'. It's from like around 1910 or 11. The electric cars are running on it. You want to hear the word rock and roll used in 1910?
Where have you been since the time I've been so long gone? I've been down beneath the house, I got to do the things and my body keeps a going high. Keep on rock and roll in your arms, rock and roll in your arms, rock and roll in your arms, in the arms of Moses.
Yeah, rockin' and rollin'. Over 100 years ago, this guy was rocking and rolling on a 5-inch record. All right, you got this. This is as thin as a piece of paper. They would put this in magazines or something. You've seen these before. I don't know what speed it is. It doesn't really matter. You put out a magazine and have that in the inside cover, or even in the case of this, on the cover. This is a 3-inch record. Elvis Presley, Sun Records. That's all right, Mama. Well, this is. Oh, here's another strange format. It's called the Edison Diamond Disc. Wrong. Oh, Edison Diamond Disc. I got one over here. I forgot to tell you about that. I think I got one over here. Oh, shame. Oh, I thought I had one over there. All right, I found it. All right, these things are both called Edison Diamond Discs. Very different. This one here is from the teens and 20s. Edison was the cylinder guy. He invented the record player. He added on cylinders, and he swore that the cylinders were better. And everybody in the world was started buying discs only, and he was going out of business. So he said, "Yeah, I'll put out a disc too." Totally different format. I guess he never learned his lesson about the format wars. People always go whichever is the cheapest format. So he came out with another one, which was a big mistake, and this didn't catch on. Edison Diamond Disc records are totally different than all the other records of the time. They have a groove that goes up and down. The music is a hill and dale instead of side to side. So that's why they make the record so thick, so that it's totally flat and won't warp. Because a regular record, if it warps, the needle goes from side to side. It doesn't matter. It goes up and down, but the music is side to side. Here, if the groove is up and down, and the needle goes up and down, because the whole thing is sideways, you can't have the record warp, because if it's warped, then it'll get loud and soft or whatever. It'll screw the music up. These are very fine grooves, and the needle was a diamond needle. Instead of, like the Victor and Columbia's, they had the steel needle and a big fat 78 RPM groove. Big thick groove to take a steel needle, which wasn't even really all that sharp. Edison used a diamond. And they never wore out. You could have a diamond. I've seen diamond disc record players where the diamond was original. It's 100 years old and it's the same diamond. They never changed them because they're diamond. You can't make a diamond wear out. It's the hardest thing in the world. The sound quality on these things, if you play it on a diamond disc record player, Watt Blues. I don't know what that means. Is it about Italians? Is it about without papers? I have no idea what that means. You're not supposed to play these on Victrolas because it'll ruin them. The steel needle and all that weight. But on a modern record player, there's only like 3 grams of weight. It can't ruin anything. I'm using a micro groove needle, the kind you use for 33s and 45s. But I'm putting it at a 78 speed. Doesn't sound bad. Now, later on, Edison came out with his super micro groove. This is about 150 grooves per inch. That's like a micro groove record, like an LP or a 45 or something. And then he came out with a format at the end of the 20s, which was 450 grooves per inch. And it was 12-inch. He wanted to put as much music on it as he possibly could. I think it's something like 40 minutes of music on each side. He had ideas. He had an LP back in the 20s. He played 40 minutes of music on each side. It's high quality. That actually sounded good, even though it's totally wrong. This is a Hill and Dale played on a lateral thing. All right, so that's the Edison Diamond disc, the real one. This one here says Edison. McGraw-Edison, the McGraw-Edison Company. It's a thin vinyl red record, Edison Diamond discs. This was actually a company in the 50s and 60s. It was Thomas Edison's son. Edison was long dead. And this is one of those recorded home type things. You buy a bunch of these blank ones, you put it on your Edison dictaphone or Edophone, wherever they were selling in the 50s. And you can record your own voice or music, which was kind of stupid because they already had tape recorders by then. It's 16 RPM, which I have over here. It's got a 1.5 inch hole in the middle. It's exactly the same size as a 45. I have no idea whether it's Hill and Dale or lateral, but it plays on lateral. Well, whoever recorded this back in the 50s or 60s, he must have had his thing on the wrong speed, because this is playing too slow.
You want to look into it closer? We play intelligently, we gotta study it. Alright,
it's playing back too slow, which means they recorded it too fast.
Books, maybe.
If I put this on 33,
That's too fast. That's an idea. You like books, miss?
Elizabeth Taylor. You like Elizabeth Taylor, miss?
If I put it on 8 RPM,
She don't like Eddie because he's married. Tell him we can fix it.
yeah. Sorry about that. Since we're over here on the 16 RPM player, this is a record player that's got 3 speeds. That's got 3 speeds, 78, 45, and 33. This has 33, 16, and 8. Obviously, this record is worth absolutely, well, it's just for looking at for the format, because it's somebody's home record that they made. Speaking of 16, they used to put books out. Mark Twain, the best writings of Mark Twain. There's like a little album of records. Sometimes you find these things, nobody can play them. It's the same size and shape as a 45, but it's 16 RPM.
about this business with his customary imbecility and imagining that he is talking
Yeah, that's
sense.
Mark Twain.
Now, that is the way to write. Peppery and to the point. Mush and milk journalism gives me the fan talk.
That's right. That's Mark Twain.
About this time, a brick came through the window with a splintering crash and gave me considerable of a jolt in the back. I moved out of range. I began to feel in the way. The chief said, "That was the colonel."
I don't have any 8 RPM records. I don't even think I've ever seen an 8 RPM record. All right, come on, get in there. All right, we got some. This is basically to tell you the 3 different sizes of LPs. These are all 33 1/3. A full-size LP has usually 5 or 6 songs on each side. 12-inch. They don't really make these. They stopped making these in the 50s and 60s. A 10-inch LP. These are called LPs. Long play. They're 33 1/3. They made a lot of these in the 50s. There's usually about 4 songs on each side. 33 1/3. Maurice Rocco. This is a 7-inch LP. 2 songs on each side. They call them an EP. And it's 45 RPM. There's 2 songs on each side. And this also is Maurice Rocco. And the big ones are called albums because it's supposed to be like this album, which also happens to be Maurice Rocco. These are all singles. These are 78s from the 40s. Maurice Rocco was the first guy that ever played rock and roll, by the way. He called himself John D. Rockerfellow in the 40s. Yeah, that's... We still got more. Hold on. Oh, here's one. This format here, Edison had his 40 minutes of music on each side. This one has even more. Because this is the Seaberg. This is a 9-inch record. Extreme super duper micro groove. To the point where you can't even really play it with a regular needle. Because the regular micro groove needles are about a 0.7 millimeter radius at the tip. These grooves are designed to be played with a needle that's even finer than that, a 0.5, which you can't get, and you can't play this on a record player. It's got a 2-inch hole in the middle instead of 1.5. It's a 9-inch record instead of any size you've ever seen before. It's a Muzak record. Seaberg Jukebox Company. This is the longest playing record ever made. 420 grooves per inch, which is way more micro groove than the micro grooves are. There's about 2 inches on there, so that's about 840 grooves, and it's 16 RPM. So you get your pocket calculator out here. 840 grooves divided by 16 and 2/3. 16.7. 50 minutes of music. 50 minutes of music on one side of these. Would you like to hear what that sounds like? I'm going to play it on this needle. It's probably going to skip. And I don't have a 2-inch adapter here for it. You're going to be hearing some Muzak. That's not a record that you'd ever buy.